Hey YouTube, Joeboy here. So, One Piece chapter 1151 is out. If you guys haven't checked out that chapter yet, I suggest that you do so because I will be spoiling you. Now that you have, let's begin. Holy hell, man, it certainly didn't take very long for us to get a few more answers and confirm a few more theories. It is officially go time. It's really tough to know where to begin with this review because I kind of feel like I said most of the things that I wanted to say about this chapter in the last chapter. Feels as though we were on the right track. And a lot of this really just serves to justify a little bit more the things that I was saying last week. So if you haven't watched that review, I guess I will include it as a link in the description, just so that I don't have to repeat most of the logic train that I had before. So with that being said, let's start at the beginning of this chapter, and I will try to fill in the blanks as best as I can without repeating too much. So the first thing that we get is some of Dory and Brogy's subordinates, including Kashi, confronting them about being demons, trying to reason with them that killing Elder Jarl is totally not cool. Elder Jarl is our hero, but Kashi's pleas do nothing. I want you to keep this little detail in mind because it's gonna come up again at the end of this review. I think we're gonna talk about this more. Arguments, whether logical or rational or whatever, will not flip demons and will have no effect. From the last chapter, we know that this is part of the deal with the devil. Imu explicitly said it. But it's also kind of interesting to me that Brogy kind of engages in conversation, like he's trying to, in a way, defend what he's doing. He says the warrior we once admired has grown old and feeble, so it's time to force him into retirement. Like, bro, this makes me so sad. The demons' minds are just totally corrupted. It's basically brainwashing. Dory and Brogy are not thinking for themselves, they're following an order. But they aren't portrayed as like pacifista, they're not mindless robots. Imu's authority is simply the ultimate truth. And we can actively see Brogy's brain twist itself in knots in order to justify it. Like I said, this is sad and this is scary. I think in part because of how real it feels. Just being on the internet, you can find quite a lot of people that think in this way. What their ruler says, whoever this ruler might be, is always right. And our brains can try and make it work. I hate to be preachy, but if your opinion lines up 100% with some authority figure, seek help. You are likely a demon. But anyway, Kashi doesn't seem to realize the situation is hopeless, so he gets a nudge from another giant named Tallman. Tallman says, "Stay back, Kashi. They were flipped over and turned into different people entirely. Now they're like demons, dark and twisted all the way to their core." But while he's explaining this, he happens to fall in between Dory and Brogy, and then he flips as well. So I just want to make sure that my perception of what's happening is clear to you guys, and that I explain it somewhat in full. My theory from last week is that Imu's powers relate to authority, but there's some nuance as to what is happening. So when Imu made a contract with Dory and Brogy, Imu became Dory and Brogy's king. And I think that likely Dory and Brogy gave Imu their souls. Lifespan is another word for soul. Now, they didn't give up their souls willingly, of course, but that is essentially what happened. Now Dory and Brogy are soulless beings, which I think goes a long way to explain their drastic change in personality. But here's where it gets interesting, because I think that the way Imu's powers work is by flipping Dory and Brogy. Now, Dory and Brogy can flip their own subordinates. Due to his contract, Imu gained authority over Dory and Brogy. However, Dory and Brogy already had authority over their crew. So as Imu flipped them, they can now flip their crew, and not anybody else. If this theory ends up being wrong, then I guess this review is going to be really funny in retrospect. But I feel pretty confident about this for now, bearing in mind that we still have a lot to learn about Imu's abilities. But mainly what this theory serves to do is it really explains why Imu has ordered Dory and Brogy to become kings of Elbaf, because there's a line of authority that branches out like a tree. If Imu really wants to flip every giant, then it requires him to have control over the king of Elbaf. Dory and Brogy being the captains of their crew is very limiting. But first things first, I gotta give a shout out to the entire community because, oh my god, you guys figured out Imu's ability way too fast. My comment section and many others were spammed with the idea that Imu's ability to transform other giants had something to do with the board game Reversi or Othello. I guess everybody else kind of reacted the same way that I did when I heard this, of like, okay, seems pretty good. So literally the first thing that I did after I posted my chapter review is like tried to begin a theory where I would expound upon this and apply it in perhaps some novel ways. But then Oda went ahead and confirmed all of this in the next chapter. Seriously cock-blocked. I guess my only conclusion out of all this is what I get for trying to make a video on time. But needless to say, the idea that Imu's abilities operate like a game is a very substantiated idea. I guess I'll probably end up making this video anyway, because some things just need a standalone video. This is one of them. Just have to reimagine the whole script and focus. So honestly, I don't feel the need to explain the game Reverse Heat to you guys. You can Google it if you want to. Oda also specifically drew the game in the panels. Imu is literally playing. So at this point, I figure we all get how this works. But in my mind, the whole idea is genius. If the black pieces or the demons surround the white pieces or the good guys, the piece flips. The white piece becomes a demon. But this also provides us an opportunity, potentially, for the white pieces to surround the demons and flip them back. I have myself a theory about how this will all play out, but it's kind of difficult to explain. I think that the first thought that most everyone is going to have is that, well, there's far more white pieces than there are black pieces. Like, there's not that many demons, and we have literally hundreds of giants and perhaps Luffy, etc., right? So, just surround all the demons and you win. But this is kind of where the authority theory really messes with what you're thinking. It's literally stated in the chapter by Killingham that the board is currently dominated by black pieces, which shouldn't make sense, right? There's so many giants left unconverted. And if you actually look at Imu's board, this is the case. There's not that many white pieces left to flip. There's not enough to flip any of Dory and Brogy's crew back. So I hate to be repetitive, but just to remind you, this is just Dory and Brogy and their crew. Those are the only players in the game right now, which would mean that if things stay the way that they are right now, we actually won't be able to convert Dory and Brogy back. Unless Oda throws something else into here, like for instance, Imu's ability has a time limit because he forced Dory and Brogy to give him their soul, and the power can essentially fail. But what I'm saying is that right now, nobody else can convert the demons back into people, in my opinion. Nobody else is playing the game. So honestly, guys, this is why I think that Dory and Brogy might succeed in becoming kings of Elbaf, or conquering the land of Elbaf. However it is that you could make yourself king of this land, they will do that. Because in my opinion, that would make the game active for most everybody else. Then their subordinates would be everybody who is subservient to the king of Elbaf, or the country of Elbaf. Then you would spawn a bunch of white pieces that could potentially flip back some of the black pieces. Does that make sense? But like I said in my last chapter review, I really don't think, at least currently, that the strats are going to be involved in this game. And by extension, the same would be true of Hyrodin and his crew, potentially Jaguar D Sol, and Loki. Because you have to be within the authority hierarchy to be a piece. So the players currently are Dory and Brogy and their crew. If Dory and Brogy end up becoming the kings of Elbaf, then we're talking about everyone who serves the king of Elbaf. If all of this is true, some people simply are not players. So basically what I think is that even if Luffy beats the crap out of these demons, I just don't think that they'll flip back. Would love to be wrong though. But of course, this is a story about Luffy and crew. You know that they are going to be vital to what happens here, so, Luffy will interject himself in some way. And I think that I know which way this will be. Luffy is Nika, and the giants of Elbaf worship Nika as their god. That is how Luffy gets involved. At least once Elbaf believes in him. So guys, I just want to prepare you that we're going to go on a pretty long tangent. It's kind of difficult for me to explain, but I will try my best. But I do think that it is important. So a little patience might be required as I stumble through my words. In the chapter, Dory says, "We will reign as kings. Elbaf has no need for idols or gods." Which I think further highlights how vitally important it is that the giants of Elbaf worship the sun god. Contextually to me, it's pretty clear that the giants in the past thought that King Harold was literally the sun god. And in fact, they might still believe that to this day, even though he is dead. To me, there's an association between the true king of Elbaf and Nika. The giants believe that their true king is Nika. So to me, this is the purpose of Emu's objective, to shatter the spirit of Elbaf. By the way, and I'm just as shocked as anyone, I called the ever-living shit out of this. In my video, This Is Why Gold D. Roger Never Died, I'll include a link in the description, we talked about an island's heart, its soul, its spirit, and why it could potentially be relevant in Elbaf, essentially speculating parallels between Drum Island and Elbaf, specifically Dr. Hiruluk's dream of curing the sick heart of Drum Island. Right now, Emu is striving to corrupt Elbaf's heart, and I think that Luffy and crew are going to heal it. So I have a feeling that in order for Emu to flip the entirety of Elbaf, it is not so simple as killing Elder Jarl. Emu also has to kill the country's belief in King Harold and everything that King Harold stood for. And in my eyes, this objective is very achievable. The God's Knights in Emu have already begun by destroying the school and burning the books. But really, the heart of Harold's ideology and why the people were so captivated in him and believed in him is pacifism. You already know that Harold is going to have an amazing backstory, but I think that critical amongst all of this is going to be the story of how Harold never fought, yet won every battle, or at the very least was never defeated. So we began this arc with the surprising twist that the giants of Elbaf currently do not want to be warriors, they do not want to engage in violence or even really aggression in any form. It's just intuitive to me that this philosophy is going to become very difficult to defend in the face of what is to come. So essentially, the moment that the giants of Elbaf, the rest of them, abandon pacifism is the moment that the spirit or soul of Elbaf shatters. They would essentially be saying that King Harold's ideology was wrong, and they no longer follow it, breaking Harold's hold over the country even after he has passed, opening up the country to now have a new king and a new Nika. So let's summarize real fast. The giants believe in Nika. The giants believed that King Harold was Nika. King Harold as Nika had a very specific form. If Emu is able to convince the giants to abandon their Harold Nika beliefs, then I think Dory and Brogy could actually become kings of Elbaf. And while they claim that their country does not need a god, it is very likely that the giants of Elbaf will begin to believe that Dory and Brogy are Nika. Although I'm curious whether or not the dual captaincy thing would be a problem. Would be legit insanity if Emu realized that 2 captains was a problem, so then set Dory and Brogy against each other so that 2 captains would become 1. Basically replaying Little Garden, and we know how that worked out. 100 years of stalemate. Chef's kiss if it goes down like this. But to take a step back, because the giants believe in Nika and worship the sun god, Luffy being that person most likely will matter. Even though he may not be able to flip demons back into regular giants, I do think that Luffy can become their king. So even if Emu does not intend this, Luffy might be able to make himself a player. And from here, potentially crazy things could happen. Honestly, this review is pretty tough for me just because there is so much that we do not know for certain. How Emu's abilities work, forefront amongst that. But if Emu's ability works based on authority and then Luffy is suddenly the god of the giants, that seems like a big deal. This is totally an open-ended question. I really don't know the answer, but is it required for the king to be a demon? Did Emu start with Dory and Brogy for a reason? So I guess my question is if Luffy becomes their king, does everyone just flip back? I really have no idea. We seriously need to get some official rules for this game before I lose my mind. Anyway, before we get lost, I think that what is happening right now could be very relevant when it comes to the One Piece. Assuming Emu survives this arc, which I think is a pretty safe guess right now, then Emu is likely to do something similar on a global scale, right? So one of Emu's objectives right now in Elbaf is to shatter the country's spirit, its heart, its soul, its identity. So if we take his words literally, Emu's objective is to smash Elbaf's spirit into several pieces, effectively crush the collective dreams of the residents of that island. So let me break it down. We have individual spirits of people. We then have collective spirits, which then become the spirit of an island. Could there perhaps be something similar for the entire world? The collective spirit of the world. or its collective will, or its collective dreams. Basically, there's something that is shared between all islands of the world and the people that inhabit them. Is this what One Piece actually means? The soul of the world is broken, and our hero is on a journey to put the pieces back together. So I feel like what I'm saying is kind of confusing, so I'm going to do a little bit of reiterating. You can take our example of Harold that we had a few minutes ago. Harold, who the Giants of Elbaf likely worshipped as Nika, unified them under a dream, and he made them believe in that dream. Essentially, this dream is that they would never need to fight if that is not what they desired. This dream then became a substantial portion of the spirit of Elbaf, which Imu intends to shatter. So at some point in the past, the world had a collective dream in a similar way. And in the past, that too was shattered when the people stopped believing in it, because people simply do not believe that it is possible. Do you guys remember Luffy's dream? Whenever he brings it up, everyone who hears it is shocked. This could straight up be the One Piece. Certainly would explain why Oda has not told us what Luffy's dream actually is, because fulfilling it would literally be the One Piece. But of course, before we can fulfill the dream, the world needs to believe in it. If somebody like Luffy were able to do this, then the spirit of the world would heal or become whole. I hope what I'm saying is understandable and I'm not talking in riddles, but just frankly, this isn't really that distant from what everyone already thought the One Piece was. It just specified in a kind of profound way. Because before, when you thought One Piece, what did everyone think? Like world peace, as an example. A dream the vast majority of people have, but very few people actually believe in. I really doubt that that is Luffy's dream, but it's something of that nature. But anyway, I kind of said this without saying this. It's important that Harold is this Nika-like figure in Elbaf, and he unified Elbaf under a dream and made the people believe in this dream. It is likely the Nika of the past, aka Joy Boy, did the very same thing. As a side note, this reminds me a lot of Martin Luther King Jr. in his speech, I Have a Dream. I kind of wonder if Oda was inspired. Either way, this would almost definitely make MLK a Nika-like figure. But then in One Piece, Joy Boy failed, and the world's dream was shattered into many pieces, making this dream what the One Piece actually is, this unified vision for the future. So therefore, it becomes very intuitive that Luffy, as this age's Nika, is going to make the entire world believe in a dream. The One Piece once again. And as Whitebeard told us, when the One Piece is found, the world will turn upside down. So if you've forgotten, this is how we got on this tangent. The idea that if Elbaf collectively believes in Luffy as Nika, that they will all simultaneously flip back. Or rather than the world turning upside down, which is what Imu is doing, the world will turn right side up. We're also now kind of conflating two things. Luffy and crew might end up learning about the One Piece in Laugh Tale. It seems to be a journal of Joy Boy's adventures. From it, I presume you'll figure out what Joy Boy's dream or goals were. But we're also kind of saying that finding the One Piece has as much to do as the world coming to understand or know about this dream as it is believing in it. So finding the One Piece could coincide with the world collectively believing in Luffy. But anyway, I don't want to twist myself into knots in order to say something specific. I just wanted to communicate how I think this chapter is related to the One Piece. Elbaf is essentially in the process of losing their treasure, their One Piece. Imu intends to erase his stream from the country. But if this gets your mind going, then I welcome it. I feel like Oda is a master at taking our brains in so many different directions depending on what's happening, but this kind of makes me think about the initial D as well. For a long time, we've thought, well, D and Dawn, that kind of works, doesn't it? D and Dreams. But Devil and Demon is looking pretty good right now. And honestly, this story doesn't even have to be about Joy Boy. This story might predate them. But if the world collectively believes in Nika as their king, as their savior, as their god, what would happen if Imu flipped Nika? I would presume then that all of their followers could potentially be flipped as well, which would be how you would legitimately demonize an entire belief. I'm pretty certain that this has happened. And at the very least, this would certainly explain why the Giants are confused about the nature of Nika. So it's a good time to remind you that the Harley text exists, and it's probably worth reading again given what we now know or suspect. The second world, within the void there was a breath. The forest god tamed demons, and the sun spread the fires of war. Those of the half moon dreamed, those of the moon dreamed. Man killed the sun and became God, and the sea gods stormed. This could literally end up being a story about how the world collectively believed in Nika, but then Nika was transformed into a demon. The sun then spread the fires of war. So then due to this, man killed the sun and became God. Anyway, I think that all of this conversation is relevant because based on this chapter, I think that we pretty much know for a fact that Emu flipped King Harold. Emu says, "Press on until the spirit of Elbaf shatters. Had Harold not blundered in that critical hour, this nation would long have been beneath my rightful dominion." Yeah, Emu's not explicit, but I'm just gonna go ahead and call this a reveal. In my opinion, the key to understanding this is understanding exactly what blunder Harold could have committed. And at the very least, I have a very plausible explanation. So in my opinion, it's pretty self-evident that Emu intended on flipping King Harold into a demon, so that the rest of the country could also be flipped. But with the way that we've speculated that these powers work, you have to believe in King Harold as the true king of Elbaf. AKA the giants needed to believe that King Harold was Nika. So look, we pretty much already know that Emu is a patient being. They're immortal, so they can wait for the perfect moment to do pretty much anything. So full disclosure, I still want to believe that King Harold was a good guy who had good intentions. But it's really starting to look like he made some sort of deal or promise with the world government that he would become the true king of Elbaf and that everyone would believe in him. To me, it just seems likely that this promise was made many years before King Harold died. And so Emu intended on flipping King Harold into a demon at the precise moment, after Harold communicated that he had accomplished his objective. So the promised day arrived, Emu flipped Harold into a demon, but there was an unforeseen problem. This is what I think King Harold's blunder was. Not everyone believed in him. He was mistaken. Two of these characters, at the very least, are Elder Jarl and Loki. They are the ones that are primarily responsible for Emu's plan failing 14 years ago. So now really the question is like, what exactly happened specifically? In order for me to take a stab at this though, I think that it requires one more ingredient. In my opinion, this chapter heavily implied or suggested that Elder Jarl is in fact Mosa. We're kind of skipping ahead in the chapter a bit, but Loki gets a call from Mosa, and Mosa's basically like, look, I'm probably about to die. Not what they actually said, right, but basically what they meant. So at this point, there is only one character who makes sense as the identity of Mosa, and that is Elder Jarl. Elder Jarl did not seem shocked that giants transformed into demons. We've speculated that Elder Jarl was there the day that King Harold transformed, hence the sword in his skull. And he knows right now that Emu and group intend on killing him. He's also 350 years old, and there's not much that he can do about it, and is the only one that would seem as though they would have the presence of mind to sort of make a last phone call. I guess at the very least, who else could you make an argument for? Genuine question. Like, if you guys have other ideas that can be substantiated in any way other than maybe it's this random giant, you know? Leave it in the comments. But for now, Elder Jarl as Mosa doesn't just make the most sense, it's the only one that makes sense. But anyway, let me read chapter 1134 for you again when Mosa initially called Loki. Am I bothering you? Nah, I could use a conversation partner, and I've got all the time in the world. Are you still traumatized by that experience you were telling me about? Mosa says, I am. Even now, the memory makes me tremor uncontrollably. Loki says, hurts me to hear it too. If I were there in your place, I'd have razed it to the ground and killed them all instead. So obviously I think the event that traumatized Elder Jarl was the flipping of King Harold. Loki says that in Mosa's place he would have killed them all, which tells us that Mosa had some group of enemies. So in my opinion, all of this checks out except for the fact that Loki doesn't seem to be aware that Mosa is talking about King Harold. So I'm just guessing that Mosa was never too specific about what exactly traumatized him. He spoke in very vague terms. The other thing that I feel like we can glean from this conversation is Elder Jarl firstly probably didn't have the ability, but secondly didn't have the desire to do what Loki would have done, which is kill everyone, even though they may have been demons. Mosa says, I wasn't hoping for that much. To which Loki says, and that's why you're so weak. Listen, you don't want to let these fools get away. You put them down for good, or they'll come back for vengeance. So here's what I think actually happened. And I might add a little bit of a creative element to this as well, just to complete the picture. Elder Jarl was there when King Harold transformed. Then suddenly, because of King Harold, many of the other giants started to transform as well. But because Elder Jarl believed in Loki as the true king of Elbaf, Elder Jarl was spared. So did Jarl run? Well, based on the end of the last chapter, this does not seem very likely. Warriors do not run. In addition, Jarl, as a 350-year-old giant, had essentially no prospects of defeating these demons. So his only realistic weapon to use in this situation would have been his words. So to add in a bit of logic here, I think that it's also worth pointing out that it's very unlikely that Elder Jarl made it clear that he did not believe in King Harold as the true king of Elbaf. Elder Jarl is essentially lying to everyone, being very coy about what he actually believes. And we have already seen this happen in Elbaf. During the party or the feast, Nika is brought up, and Elder Jarl is very, very sly when he throws in there that, by the way, there's another way to interpret Nika. He's not outright saying that he disagrees with everyone else's interpretation, but he's playing the middle. He's telling everyone what he believes without actually saying that he believes in it. So I guess I like the thought that Elder Jarl is kind of subservient to what he believes the rest of the country wants, or what they believe in. Basically, if all y'all believe in King Harold, I guess I'll trust in your judgment and pretend that I believe as well. Also, I tend to think that if Elder Jarl was straightforward that he believed that Loki was the true king of Elbaf, most of the country would have took offense to that. So if you start portraying Elder Jarl in this way, he's both kind of a coward and also very humble. Maybe you can even call it wisdom. What I believe isn't necessarily the case. What others believe matters to me. Generally speaking, I think that this is a pretty good mindset if you want the truth, being open-minded to what other people believe. But at the same time, this is also kind of a negative for Elder Jarl, because I honestly think that the story is trying to tell you that believing in things that you want because you want them is probably a good thing. Some people would call this bias or wishful thinking, but that is in fact what the Straw Hat Crew does. They believe in things because they want to believe in them. Anyway, I feel like I'm getting off track, but I have one more thing that I want to say. I honestly am beginning to wonder whether or not Elder Jarl wanted to believe in Harold's vision for Elbaf, but he simply did not possess that faith, because he also believes in what a warrior is and why warriors are required. Probably related to his time as a pirate, getting to see the world, adventure the world, meet all the people, and understand the danger that surrounds Elbaf. Long story short is I'm beginning to think that Elder Jarl wanted to believe in King Harold and chose to attempt to believe in King Harold, just couldn't make it all the way. Nonetheless, when King Harold was transformed into a demon, I would imagine that that would be a disappointment. So now let's go back to where we were a few minutes ago. King Harold is transformed into a demon. You should imagine that probably very similar to Dory and Brogy right now. I like the thought that Emu had an entire event planned where King Harold would transform, and then it's an environment in which a lot of other giants would quickly transform as well. And at this point, Jarl really only has one weapon to fight this: words. Or perhaps you could call it the truth. As they say, the truth will set you free. So this is a bit creative on my end, but it works for my purposes. What if Elder Jarl simply told everyone that, look, Harold cannot be Nika if he is transformed into a warmongering demon? That's not what you guys believed in. Now, we already know that part of the contract that Emu makes requires the people who flip to abandon logic and reason. So this argument wouldn't have worked on any demons. But it is possible that this sort of thing would have worked on giants who hadn't yet transformed. Again, if it's anything like what's happening right now, it requires some circumstances in order to flip people. For instance, this game of reversey. So there's some time between when Harold transformed into a demon, as we think happened, and everyone else in the room also being transformed. So hypothetically, what you could accomplish is you could convince the giants that hadn't flipped yet that Harold is not their true king. Which again, if these powers work as we have speculated, it requires Harold to be the king of people in order for them to be pieces in the game. Authority or domain matters. But yeah, basically the idea is Elder Jarl set everyone else free with the truth, which foiled Emu and Harold's plan. And as a side note, this just works really well with the present circumstances. The fact that one of Emu's first objectives here is to have Dory and Roki kill Elder Jarl. Emu has clearly marked Jarl as a threat, and it might be related to what happened in the past. So Jarl makes some kind of persuasive speech, and as a result ends up with a sword in his head, King Harald's sword. It could also be symbolic if Elder Jarl decided to not fight back, given that would be a representation of what Harald formerly supposedly believed. But from that moment onwards, Elder Jarl was out, and I guess it's a miracle that he survived. But if it went down something like this, you would then likely have chaos. If giants aren't flipping into demons and don't believe Harald to be their king any longer, right? What is likely to happen is a big fight. And that big fight could have drawn the attention of Loki, who ended up doing exactly what Loki told Mosa to do: kill everyone, including Harald. But anyway, guys, I immediately regretted trying to go down this specific rabbit hole of what I think happened, because it's a bit too specific, requires way too many assumptions. But I got a few minutes in and I really didn't want to delete everything, because we're also talking about a lot of things that I actually wanted to talk about. But essentially the way that I'm trying to frame this in my mind is with respect to the fact that we know that Loki does not know who Mosa is. So however it played out, it was never clear to Loki that Jarl was Mosa. I do think what we speculated here checks all of the boxes that we have available to us. But there are a lot of places where Oda can make small changes that could influence, like exactly the sequence of events. Probably the healthiest mindset is to look at this as how it could possibly work, while knowing that it will likely be different. Call it a proof of concept. But honestly, guys, I couldn't be any more excited to see this story play out. There's so many little things about this, like, even as I'm recording this review, little thoughts that I have in my mind, like, for instance, Elbaf coming to believe in Luffy as Nika, realizing that he's their savior, strikes a right chord with me. Maybe this won't end up making sense to anybody but me, but there's a kind of satisfaction for me that the people of the One Piece worlds will legitimately discover the truth. It's just something I feel like us mortals in the real world will never get to experience for ourselves. Kinda like Roger, yeah, we were all born in the wrong era, probably. Like, some of you will know this, but I love debate. I love engaging in conversation. It's how I learn best, even when I'm wrong. You can ask my wife. We have conversations about most things that happen all the time, and I enjoy it immensely. But as I've gotten older, I've very, very slowly realized that there's some debates you can't win. Your opponent will not allow you to win. So in a way, to me, it feels like progress towards a consensus, like a general truth, is halted. So in a way, I'm kind of living vicariously through this fictional story, because we will eventually reach the truth. As just one example among many, the Giants of Elbaf will learn for sure that Nika is a laughing, smiling god of joy, but is probably also, to some extent, a god of destruction. Both of those things are true. But to reach this, Elbaf has to go through literal hell. Anyway, I'm just musing out loud. I have a strong feeling that Elbaf is going to end up being one of my favorite arcs of all time. So let's get back to the chapter. I'm honestly a bit heartbroken at the Killingham face reveal. Like, my god, that dude looked nothing like that in his fully transformed state. I honestly thought he was silly or goofy. This is the guy that you're gonna make look insanely cool? Another Oda troll successfully executed. Also, just immediately looking at him, I wonder if he's part fishman or legitimately of the demon race. Those teeth remind me a lot of Dellinger. I have no idea if this is relevant to bring up or not, but gonna throw that out there. But what I do think is relevant is Killingham's nightmares. So long as the giants are afraid of these and they're sowing chaos everywhere, it's going to be very difficult for the giants to mount any sort of resistance to their, demonification. I honestly feel as though this is going to be one of the ways in which Luffy really inspires the giants. There is no chance that he would be afraid of these things, and I feel as though that alone will make them powerless. Elbaf has literally become a dream island, which might as well make it Luffy's playground. I think that the way that it's going to work is that if you have a very strong belief, that belief will manifest. So if Luffy comes to understand that these things are nightmares, they're dreams, they're not real, then being not real, they cannot do real harm. And then they won't. But I suppose first, Luffy actually needs to arrive. So this was the focus of the second half of the chapter. We finally get a continuation of Luffy and group trying to take Loki back to the village for healing. In the middle of all this, Scopper Kaban falls from the sky. We learn that Chopper decided just to jump off and try to save him, and was successful, which low-key shout out to Chopper for that. Feel like I was reading My Hero Academia for a moment. The urge to be a hero just overtook him. His legs moved on his own. Then not long after this, Imu unleashes their Conqueror's Haki, and our heroes officially know that shit is going down. But yeah, I gotta say guys, I think that I enjoyed the second half of this chapter more than the first half. It was just, I don't know man, it just worked. I feel like the Avengers are assembling. The banter back and forth, the jokes, it just feels time to kick some butt. And I think the thing that I loved most within all of this is just Loki. Despite the way that he attempts to project, Loki is actually a good dude, and he feels like part of the crew now. It's also somewhat ironic and hilarious that he's attempting to make deals with people just like the devil upstairs Imu, but is a lot more chill about it. I guess just to remind you that the kind of Nika Loki is attempting to be is a lot like Imu, but his heart isn't really in it in the same way. I'm gonna go ahead and call my shot early. I think that Loki might supplant Katakuri as my favorite recent character. You guys see the parallels, right? Katakuri and Loki are very similar, and so I like them for the same reason. But Loki is just straight up even cooler. So I'm praying that he survives, which is not a guarantee given that, he still has his injuries. But without a doubt, the story just seems poised for Loki to steal the screen with what is to come. Speaking of discovering the truth vicariously through the fictional story of One Piece, right? I just can't wait to see the look on the giants' faces when they realize that the entire time, Loki was a good guy. Y'all chained him up for 6 years because he literally saved your country. I'm just hoping that Oda thinks it's a bit too brutal to actually have Loki die for them so they can never reconcile, because boy, would that be brutal. But at the same time, just being honest, something like that might be required for Hiriden to fulfill his own dreams. I just think that given everything that has happened, it would be really hard for Hiriden to become the king of all giants and unite the giants when Loki is still around. But yeah, I guess we'll call the review good here. The setup for the final fight in Elbaf has been spectacular. Honestly, I think that Oda has done it here in Elbaf a lot better than he did even in Wano. So we're poised for some greatness. But as always, I'm curious as to what you guys think, whether you noticed something from the chapter that I might have missed. Just share your thought. If you're interested, check out my book, The Booms. Link is in the description. Like the video, subscribe, click the bell to be notified, join the squad, and as always guys, have a wonderful day.